Hey you! Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I don't look so good today. I look sick. I look so tired. Oh my god. I've got panda eyes. Even though I slept really well, but for some reason I'm feeling so tired and I feel like sleeping in the entire day. I feel really tired right now, but I thought to do a video because there was something in my mind which I really wanted to talk about. So yeah, here I am with this ghost face talking to you. So in this video, I wanted to talk to you guys about something that I already mentioned in my previous video. And my previous video was how talking to ourselves can do wonders for us. And in that video, I specifically mentioned about my voice of intuition getting stronger, and so I really wanted to talk about that. I really wanted to talk about all the voices that we have in our head and this voice of intuition and how to listen to our intuition, how to differentiate our voice of intuition from the other voices that are in our head. So yeah, in this video I'm going to talk about all those things. Before I start with how to find the difference between our voice of intuition and the other voices that we hear in our head, I wanted to explain what intuition really is. Because if you don't understand what your intuition really is, you won't be able to know the difference. So first we need to know what intuition really is. And for me at least, if I put it really simply, the voice of intuition is that voice in us that guides us or that shows us the way. So simply put, intuition is the voice inside you that guides you to make decisions, that guides you to take actions. This voice of intuition is built by our life experiences. So the more and the richer the life experiences that we have over time, the more it will help build this voice of intuition. So I believe, that's what I believe, that our intuition is very much based upon how our life trajectories go and how our life really turns out to be for us and the experiences that our life has in store for us. And since everybody has different kind of life experiences, everyone's intuition can work differently for them, or it can be different amongst different people. And that is why we see that some people are more intuitive as compared to some others who are more logical. And that's because some people have more richer, more deeper life experiences, or they are able to feel things on a more deeper level as compared to some people who are more logical, who are more structured about their life and their life experiences and how they act. That is why I believe that intuition is very much based on the richness of the life experiences that you have. And sometimes when that voice speaks to us, that voice doesn't really make any sense. It seems so unreasonable because there is no deductive reasoning behind intuition. It's very feeling based. It's not logic based. So when that voice speaks to us, sometimes it feels so unreasonable for us to follow that voice because we don't know why it's speaking to us that way, or why is it telling us to do something or not to do something. We don't know the whys with this voice. That's why it feels so unreasonable sometimes. It just is. It just tells you that, hey, you should do this at this moment, or you should not do this at this moment. That's your intuition. Now coming on to how is it different from the other voices in our head. But for me to get there, I need to talk about all the other kinds of voices that we have in our head. And if I'm asked to categorize all the voices that are in my head, if I'm asked to compartmentalize those voices, I would categorize them as the voice of instinct, then the voice of fear, then the voice of judgment or reasoning, and then there's the voice of intuition. So these are the four kinds that I can think of right now based on, my intellect and my life experiences that these are the 4 kinds of voices in my head that I've got. With that being said, I would really love to know what intuition means to you personally, and what are the different kinds of voices in your head. So first, talking about our instincts. So instincts are basically hardwired in our brain, and the instinct is that voice that wants us to survive. For example, if you are in any dangerous situation, the fight or flight response is your instinct, and you will be acting according to your instinct because you want to survive. There have been millions of years of evolution within human history that has contributed to the development of this voice. When we were the early humans, our great ancestors who were the hunter-gatherers, they used to survive on their instincts because they did not have the luxury that we have today. They had to hunt their meals, they had to work for their meals, and they had to, be very careful about the environment around them, which used to be very dangerous back then as compared to now. So they always used to be in this survival mode where they had to act upon their instincts to help them survive those very difficult conditions. And the voice of instincts that our great ancestors, that is the hunter-gatherers, used to have back then, those instincts have been carried forwarded to our generation through our genes and through human evolution. They are not gone yet. We still have survival instincts. We still go into survival mode a lot of times, where our mind will tell us to do things to help us survive. So the instincts are not dead, and they are different from intuition. So the biological instincts of survival, keeping ourselves well fed, of reproduction, etc., these instincts are biologically hardwired in our brains, and sometimes when the voice in our head speaks to us, they are basically the voices of our instinct rather than our intuition. The third category of voice is very closely related to our voice of instinct or our voice of survival, and that is the voice of fear. Because the more we want to survive, the more we need to be aware about all the threats that are around us that can hamper our survival. And fear is one of those voices that can help us detect those threats. So whenever we are fearful of something, that is mainly because we want to survive well, we want to be at bay from harm. So that is when we get fearful, that is when we get afraid, when there is some external circumstance that is challenging our survival. So simply put, our voice of fear is basically that voice that helps us keep a distance between ourselves and something that can hamper our survival or our means of thriving. So one very interesting thing about the voice of fear is that it questions everything. It leads us to not trust very easily, because if we trust a threat, that will end up damaging us. And so that voice of fear always second guesses or always questions as to whether to trust this or trust that, or we can really do this or do that. Would it hurt us in some way? Would it harm us in some way? That voice of fear, which is also very important actually, it helps us make sure that we are getting into the right things, or we are getting into the right situations. We are getting into situations that do not turn out to be harmful for us. It has its repercussions, I would say that. If we start questioning everything in our life, that can be very unhealthy for us. So if the voice of fear starts taking over, that might become detrimental for us. Maybe I'll talk about it in some other video. But in moderation, the voice of fear is very important, because in the world that we live in today, it can help us determine what we should trust and what we should not trust. Now, moving on to the voice of judgment. So this voice is basically our logical mind, which always wants to deduce things and come to a reason. This is the voice that will give us the answers to the whys of life or to the questions of life. Like, if you ask yourself why this happened, and then you get to analyzing the situation, your voice of judgment will act upon it. And if you have a strong voice of judgment, you will get the answer that, okay, that is why it happened, because a series of events transpired which led to this and that and everything. And all that logical deduction, all that logical reasoning is done by the voice of judgment. So that's basically our logical mind. That's how I see it. I would be very interested to know about what other people think of this thing. Do you also compartmentalize the voices in your head? I would really love to know. I would really love to know if you have a voice that is different from all these voices. So please do let me know in the comments or in the email if you have a different perspective on the voices in our head. Now, what I have observed a lot of times that happens with me is that all these voices, the 4 voices that I mentioned, the voice of intuition, then the voice of instinct, then the voice of fear, and then the voice of reasoning or judgment, all these voices, they have something or the other to say. And sometimes they get into, conflicts with each other. I especially see a conflict between my voice of intuition and my voice of judgment. Sometimes my intuition will tell me something which does not make any sense at all. But then there's this voice of judgment which will deduce everything in the moment that's happening and tell me some other thing. So these 2 voices are very much in conflict with each other a lot of times. Similarly, with my voice of instinct and my voice of fear. My voice of instinct will tell me that this is good for your survival, and my voice of fear will question that. Sometimes I see a lot of messy conflicts happening in my head because each voice has got something to say. And during those times of inner conflict, I have to be very mindful about listening to each of those voices and listening to them without the judgment taking over. And listening to those voices from a third person perspective. And that is why talking to myself also really helps in this case, because it helps me create that distance between my being and my mind while my mind is speaking so many languages. That's why, like I mentioned in my previous video, talking to myself really helps in those cases as well. Now, coming on to the crux of this video, how to differentiate between the voice of intuition and all the other voices in our head. And I feel that I answered a huge part of this question while I was describing all the different kinds of voices. So the first step that you need to do is to know what each voice in you is, what your intuition is, what your instinct is, what your fear is, and what is basically your judgment. And if you have any other voices that I did not mention in this video, you need to know what those voices are. And to know that brings me to step 2. You need to listen to those voices. You need to take time for yourself, and you need to be comfortable enough with yourself to listen to each and every voice in your head without getting overwhelmed. So the second step is to listen. The third step, which can save you from getting overwhelmed, is to listen from a distance. And how to create that distance, I already mentioned in my previous video. Talk to yourself. Talking to yourself can help you a lot in creating that distance between you and your mind, so that you can properly listen to each and every one of them without any other voice taking over, especially the voice of judgment. Once you know what each voice means to you, and once you start listening to each and every voice while you are at a distance with them, I think differentiating between them would become very easy for you. To help you make the differentiation a bit easier, I can give you a few characteristics of each voice. Talking about the voice of intuition, the voice of intuition is very direct. It never questions. It always gives an answer to something. It can be very unreasonable at times because it is not based on logic. It is based on life experience and it is based on your emotions. But it always leads you to the right path in the long run. it might not make sense to you like right now, but later down the line, the voice of intuition will prove to be good for you. Then coming on to the voice of instinct or the voice of survival, it helps you survive. So whatever situation you are in right now, it will always give you solutions which might help you survive in the moment. So that's what voice of survival or voice of instinct feels like. Moving on to the voice of fear. So the voice of fear is the voice that asks questions. It's the voice that plays the devil's advocate. It's the voice that helps you second guess things. It's the voice that wants to double check, that wants to be absolutely sure about the things that you're getting into. So that's the voice of fear. Then there's the voice of judgment. And the voice of judgment is basically our logical mind, which helps us deduce the situation or helps us give the answers to why. Why is something happening right now, or how to solve this problem. That is the voice of judgment. It always uses logic. So yeah, these are the little differences that I have learned so far between each and every voice in my head. And if you create a strong connection with the voices in your mind, it becomes easier to control those voices. It becomes easier to, comfort those voices. As opposed to what people usually say to quiet your mind and stuff like that. I could never really understand why to quiet the mind. I don't really understand how people quiet their mind. Like, it doesn't personally work for me. And that is why I had to listen to what my mind was telling me. And it told me some very awesome things actually. It told me a lot of things that I needed to know. And this is just my personal belief, but I feel that we all come in this world with very innate wisdom. And to unlock that wisdom, we need to work in collaboration with our mind rather than quiet it or shut it. So yeah, that was all I had. Those were all the thoughts that I had to share. I hope that it gave you some value. And I would also really love to know what's your perspective on this. You can shoot some comments or you can write me an email about this. Thank you so much for watching till here. If you did, I'm so grateful for you being here with me still. I'll see you soon. And till then, take care.